Now in this module, we are going to learn about scope and lifespans of a variable. Now as a programmer, it is very important to understand what is the scope and what is the lifespan of a variable, and this is exactly what we are going to learn in this module. Now, very first thing, the scope and lifespan, these are two different concepts. Okay, scope and lifespan are exactly different concepts. So in this model, we are going to see what is the difference between them, and let's get started. So let me quickly tell you what are the different types of scopes that are available in C++. So the very first scope that is available in C++ is called as global scope. Okay, so this is one of the scope that is available in C++. Now the next scope that is available in C++ is called as local or function scope. Okay, now we are going to discuss in detail what is the scope and what is this type of scope, or what exactly a local or function scope means. So we are going to discuss that. Okay, the next scope that is available in C++ is called as function parameter scope. And then we have statement or block scope, then we have namespace scope, then we also have class scope, we have enum scope, and we also have template parameter scope. Okay, so these are some different types of scopes that are available in C++. Let me quickly revise them. We have global scope, then we have local or function scope, then we have function parameter scope, then we have enum scope, then we have namespace scope, then we have class scope, right? So these are some different scopes that are available in C++. Now let me quickly tell you what is a scope. Scope is nothing but the visibility or the time for which the variable is visible or accessible inside the program. It's quite easy, right? So whenever you declare a variable, scope will tell you till what point you can access that variable, or till what point the variable is visible. And the list that we just saw is different types of scopes that are available in C++. So depending on in which place of a program you are creating a variable, the scope of that variable will be defined, or the scope of that variable will change. All right, so I hope you are very clear with the idea about the scopes of the variable. Okay, so let me quickly revise. What is a scope? Scope is basically accessibility of a variable, or scope tells us about the accessibility of the variable. From the point variable is defined till which point it will be accessible, that can be defined or that can be understood by the scope of a variable. All right, so let's see some example of different scopes that we just saw. In this video, we are just going to see some brief examples about the different scope that we have just listed, and in the upcoming videos in this model, we are going to see these scopes in much more detail. Okay, so depending on where exactly in the code the variable is declared, its scope will be defined, or its scope will be identified. So let's quickly see what is a global scope, or when can we say a variable is having global scope, or at what position if we declare a variable then it will get global scope. So let's quickly get started. So let's first see a code snippet for global scope. So let me just quickly expand this code snippet. You can see that there is one simple code snippet on your screen. Okay, so we have a simple code where you can see there is a variable defined at very top of the program before the main function, before the foo function, and the name of the variable is global and it is initialized with 5. So this variable, you can see its position, it is declared outside of the all functions. Such variables are called as global variables, or such variables have global scope. Okay, very easy. Whenever you declare a variable outside of the all function, then such variables will be called as global variable and they will have global scope. Okay, now in next video actually we are going to discuss about what exactly is meaning of having global scope, or what is advantage of having global scope. But right now just remember, you can see in this code snippet, this global variable, that is global is equal to 5, can be accessed from both of the function. You can see that we can access global inside foo function as well as inside main function. So that means whenever you declare a variable as a global variable, it will be accessible throughout the program. It will be accessible throughout the program, or its visibility will be throughout the program. Okay, so what do we mean by a global variable? A variable which is declared outside of all the function is called as global variable, and usually we define or declare global variable at very top of our program or at the beginning of our program file. Okay, and whenever we declare a global variable, it will have visibility throughout the program. So this is an advantage of global variable, and because of that you can see that the global variable can be accessed in foo function as well as in main function. Okay, so you can see in foo function we have written cout global, so that means global is accessible in foo, and in main we are reassigning some value to global, or we are assigning some value to global. That means global can be also accessed inside the main function. So this is called as a global variable. Usually we use global variable if we want to share some data between multiple functions. Okay, so let's take this example, same example. If we want to share data between main and foo, in that case we can keep that data in global variable, in some global variable, and as the variable is accessible to all the functions, both the functions can access the data, both the functions can modify the data. So this is the advantage of the global variable. Cool. So I hope you are very clear with the idea of global variable. When a variable can be called as a global variable, or when the variable will have global scope, when you will declare it outside of all the functions, then it will be called as a global variable. Okay, let's quickly move to the next scope, that is local or function scope. Okay, so let's see a code snippet of local scope. Cool. So you can see here in main function I am declaring 3 variables. So the first variable is no1, then we have no2, then we have sum. You can see these variables are declared inside of a function. So such variables are called as local variable, or I will say such variables are called to be having local scope or function scope. So whenever you declare a variable inside of a function, then they will have function scope. Always remember, the local variables or the variables which are declared inside a function which are having function scope or local scope can be accessible only inside that particular function. Okay, so whenever you declare variable, let's say number1, then the number1 can be accessible only inside the function in which you are declaring it. So in this case we are declaring number1 in main, so you cannot access number1 outside of the main function. Okay, and that basically means if you have a variable with name number1 in main, you can have variable with same name in different function as its local variable, because local variable can be accessible only in that particular function. So if we have same variable with same name in different function, then it is not an issue. Okay, so let's say you have a different function with name foo, and in that also you are declaring variable with name number1, then it is no problem, because number1 in main is different than number1 in foo, because both are having different scopes. Okay, cool, quite easy. Now always remember one important thing: whenever you declare a variable, doesn't matter whether it is local or global, its scope will always start after you declare a variable. Okay, let's take an example. Here in main function we are declaring number1 variable, and then you are also declaring number2 variable, and you are assigning 20 to number2. Can we write cout number2 before declaration of number2? Can we write that? Answer is no, we cannot write cout number2 before its declaration. That basically means you cannot access a variable before its declaration. A variable needs to be declared, and then only you can access that variable. This is very important line. Okay, so scope of the variable starts at the start of its declaration, or the scope of the variable starts with its declaration. So let's take example of global scope. The scope of a global variable starts with its declaration and it ends at the end of the program. So the scope of the global variable will be for the complete program. In case of local variable, the scope will start with the declaration of the variable and it will end at the end of the function. So quite easy. Okay, quickly let's move to the next scope. So the next scope that we have is function parameter scope. Okay, now let's quickly understand what is a function parameter scope. So let me just expand this snippet. All right, so you can see on the screen we have one function, that is foo. In this foo, it is taking two parameters or two arguments, param1 and param2. All right, so this param1 and param2 are nothing but the arguments of the function or parameters of the function, and these variables will have function parameter scope. Okay, now always remember, the variable which we declare in the parameter list or in the argument list will have function parameter scope, and the function parameter scope is very similar to your local scope. Okay, it is very similar to your local scope. So the variable scope of param1 and param2 will get started at the start of the function and it will end at the end of the function. That basically means you can access param1 and param2 inside foo function when the foo function will start, and the scope will end or the accessibility will end at the end of the foo function. Okay, so this is how the function parameter scope basically works. So quickly let's move to the next scope. So let's quickly see what is the next scope or next code snippet. So in next code snippet or in this code snippet, we are going to discuss about statement or block scope. So let's quickly see what is the statement and block scope. So what is a statement or what is a block? So block is nothing but group of a statement, or we also call it as a compound statement. So compound statement is also called as block. So how we write compound statement? We write multiple statement, enclose them in curly braces, then it becomes compound statement or it becomes block. Okay, so you can see here if body, okay, whatever we are writing in if body is nothing but our block, or it's nothing but a compound statement. Okay, so you can see the if body is getting started with curly braces and it is ending with curly braces, and then it is having multiple statement, so it is a block. Okay, similarly you can see the for loop body is also one block, or it's a compound statement. So whatever variable you declare inside this compound statement or you declare inside this block is going to get block scope, or it's going to get compound statement scope. Now the variable that you declare inside a block will be accessible only inside that particular block. So you can see in this example, I'm declaring number one variable inside if statement body, that is if block, and I'm able to access number in if statement. So I can do cout in if, cout number in if, but I cannot do cout number outside of the if body. I cannot do it inside main function outside of the if body, because the scope of the number variable is terminating or it's ending at the end of the block. So what we have learned in block scope will start at the declaration of a variable and it will end at the end of the block. So whenever you declare a variable inside a block, it will be accessible only in that particular block. Okay, now you may have this question, what will happen if we will declare a variable with same name in a function? Let's say I'm declaring number variable in main function and I'm declaring number variable in a block. So in that case, what will happen? So if I try to write cout number inside if statement, what will be the value or which variable will be considered? And if I write cout number inside main function outside of the if body, then which number variable will be considered? So such type of questions we are going to discuss in FAQ video of this model. Okay, now actually there are few more scope in the list, they were present, but we haven't seen their code snippet because we don't have much idea about the concept that we require for understanding those scopes. We haven't seen them yet. We will learn about these scopes in much more detail when we will cover these concepts. Okay, so as and when we will go ahead in the journey of C++, we are going to discuss about the remaining scopes like class scopes, then enum scope and namespace scopes. So such type of scopes we will be discussing in future. So thank you so much for watching this video. In the next video, we are going to learn about global scope in much more detail. So see you in the next video.